Welcome to Play the Man Podcast, a podcast seeking to build sturdy men in a wobbly world.
Welcome back to the Play the Man Podcast, where we talk about what it means to play the man as a faithful Christian. Today we're talking about niceness and asking the question to ourselves, is niceness killing Christianity? I think it's a valuable question, and my first gut response is it definitely is killing Christianity. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if I can back it up. You guys can back that up a little, maybe? Help me anecdotally?
Is it killing Christianity? No, it's not killing it. Is it hurting it? Yes. It's definitely. I think at the heart of niceness is fear, and fear is not a healthy attribute. For how many times does God's word tell us to fear not? This idea that to be nice is to be relevant.
Yeah.
And no one's going to hear the gospel unless we make it relevant.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of the troublesome issues lie.
What do you guys think of when you think of niceness? Like when we even say that word, like what's in your mind when you're thinking niceness is killing Christianity, or it's hurting Christianity, or making us
The
worse?
worst sin I could ever do is disagree with you and offend you. So therefore, I throttle back on truth. I throttle back, and that's not a license to be obnoxious, but it forces us into silence or compliance.
Yeah.
I don't want to manage it. Like, that's why I'm nice. I don't want to manage the hard candor that comes along with having a real conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm nice.
Yeah.
And then I don't have to manage that.
Yeah.
Right? Because to be candid or to be direct with someone requires me to have some emotional gravitas and calm. Mm-hmm. And then I'm kind of asking it from the other person. Mm-hmm. And I'm also asking for them to be raw enough to absorb it, and maybe not immediately. Mm-hmm. Right? So like, actually, I don't agree with that. Then there's like this whole conversation, whereas I could have just been like, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Yeah.
That's problematic, right? It's lazy when you look at it that way.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
I think it's true too. And I think there's a sense in which as I've gotten older, I gravitate to people who aren't nice. I gravitate to people who are authentic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you find out that this whole just being nice business is really superficial. And that actually people who might wildly disagree with me, I actually have deeper relationships and I appreciate and respect and can actually be closer to than someone who might actually have a lot more in common with me, but because of this niceness thing, I don't really know what they think or where they really stand on anything, and you can't really grow, and it almost is a sense like you got to have some conflict, you got to have some authenticity before you can really have true relationships, and so I think it kills us there in that respect as well.
And if you're speaking with someone and they're being sincere, and their ground, where they're standing, their perspective. Let's say their doctrine, mm-hmm. and they're coming across on you, and you're like, you know what? He is absolutely faithful to his doctrine, and it's buttoned up against me. Mm-hmm. But at least I'm like, I enjoy that. Yeah. In fact, I'm more likely to be that guy's friend than someone who's just wishy-washy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think niceness is, it's crept into layers and layers of our society in the sense that we don't really feel like it's hard to have a neighbor nowadays because technology or how we operate can be completely isolated, right? We did a dry run at full isolation during 2020, worked out great. We spent more money on delivering food or whatever, but like it worked, right? Everyone went home from work and this whole thing. But now there's layers of harder, less ways to be authentic. Mm-hmm. And so I almost feel like this niceness thing creeps into any form of communication. Because now there's phone screen times, there's chats, there's all these things. But in the workplace, you're not sitting next to people anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? There's this authentic problem.
Mm-hmm. You're not working remotely, you're at home, right?
Right. I mean, there's this, how do you be authentic when you're not physically with somebody and you're only really receiving a chat?
Right.
I don't even know. Right? And then in the workplace, I also think professionalism and niceness are not the same. Mm-hmm. But I actually think that they look the same if they're done well. So like you should always be professional and competent from like a you're not going to be rude when you're giving the feedback, right? But you are going to be professional, which means there's a temper.
Right.
There's a tactical sort of, you're trying to gain something with this. You're building a bridge. That's very different, right? But then someone could do that and just try to be nice.
Right.
And you're not really having a real conversation with them. You think they're being a professional or they're not. Like, it's just harder to understand what's real if we're not physically around with each other as well. So I think there's just layers of this. Everyone's ignoring hard conversations. Everyone's avoiding having a candid knockdown drag out. Let's get to the bottom of this.
Right. Don't you think it's strange too that in some way niceness is making us meaner?
It's the worst.
Yeah.
It's
Like,
so
isn't
true.
that something that's like
It's false niceness.
It
is. It's I think that's the strangest part is that we're actually so much meaner.
They are, yeah, it's
because
true.
we have this surface niceness, and then it eventually bubbles over or boils over, whatever's on the inside, the true authentic self, and then it's like heated, and people are screaming at each other, whether it's on Twitter or whether it's in real life, and you're just like, where did this come from? And so we're nicer externally than we've ever been, and like we're meaner internally, and it comes out ever so often than we've ever been as well. It's just kind of a crazy phenomenon.
Well, I always think about this when you read the letters between Erasmus and Calvin. Of course, that was a whole different era,
Right.
But how they interacted with each other was just, it was not nice.
Right.
It was name calling and slamming the arguments but there is a part of that that's refreshing.
Oh, yeah.
When I think you brought up a good point. You can disagree with someone and be respectful. You can do these things. But I think the key point in our culture right now is everything's censored, everything's monitored, everything is like, oh, that's the wrong tone, or you just might offend someone, so don't even bring it up. And I think. I think there's a good parallel to how homes used to be designed. You see them here in Bartlesville, a large front porch on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Why was that? Because people after dinner would go on their porch and people would go walks on the sidewalk 20 feet in front of them, and they would talk. They would interact. They had community. They would discuss things.
Yeah.
Do you think there's some level too where, like, because niceness is a sense of inauthenticity, I don't know, that it's harder to be authentic, it's harder to have real relationships, it's harder to have hard conversations, that we pursue that just because it's the easy road, it's the easy route. It's easier to go to church on Sunday and someone say, how are you doing? You say, I'm doing great, right? Than to say, life's really terrible right now, and would you pray for me? And I think we even see it, like, people think they want that. They want a church that's real and they want community and things like that. But then they actually get into it and life gets real and community gets real. And
Wait,
you see
I'm
people,
not anonymous anymore.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then it's like, hey, this is actually hard. I think I just want to go back to being nice. Do you guys see that or feel that at all?
I have a good example from the workplace, and I think it happens more than people want to admit, but it's a very common dynamic. You got an employee and you got a manager. The employee's stressed out, they got too much work or whatever, and they bring it to their manager, and their manager is also stressed out, can't really address this well. So instead of saying, hey, listen, these are the things you need to do, these are the things you can do to improve your life, they say, listen, I know it's a lot, keep up the good work. That is just a death sentence for that employee, because if it's not actually good work, you were nice, you didn't give them feedback, they're going to get fired 4 months down the road, and you've never signaled to them if they're failing truly at their job, and you don't have the time to get into a candid, let's work on it, you need to take ownership of this. That's not a nice thing to say. You're failing and you're the one that gets you out of it. I can help you here, but you need to do these things. That's a hard conversation emotionally to happen. And if everyone's busy and it persists a couple of months, now you have an employee who thinks that they're doing a good job and they're not. That's that person's fault. That's the manager's fault, 100%. Because they chose to be nice. I mean,
what do you think's driving it in that manager's mind? I mean, what's the primary thing?
It's the same thing above them. Like, this thing perpetuates itself within organizations. I think they get the same treatment. I think there's like a lot of ill-informed and misunderstood expectations, and it's a sea of that. So no one can really hammer anybody. So I think it's more that than really it getting isolated in a healthy way, because it's usually people that kind of have to know what to do versus not knowing what to do. And a lot of managers, they're thoughtful. They meet people. They treat them like people. That means they have a real conversation. And a lot of managers get into that role to just be a manager, and they don't know. You got to treat people like people still. That's how it goes. I'm just saying, this niceness thing, that is what I just said. I've seen it in every org I've been in, and I've seen it many times over. And it's just a mistake. But it's at the altar of, I'm too busy, I'm too lazy, I don't want to get emotionally charged up with my employee. And here's the other one. I don't want to be in the room with them knowing they're upset with me. When's the last time you upset a friend and then still went and had a beer? I'm sure you guys do this sometimes. I do, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's as common as it used to be, because especially at the workplace, we disagree, go home and lock ourselves with our friend group or whatever it is. We need to be around people we don't like.
Right.
And then we're going to like them. Or people we disagree with. And then we're going to start to find common ground. I think we just skip that whole thing. We don't want to be uncomfortable.
I like what Abraham Lincoln said. I really don't like that guy.
Right.
I need to get to know him.
Exactly.
So since we're on this topic, and we're Play the Man podcast, so I have a question with this. Do you think, because what you just said about men being able to have hard conversations and arguments and then go grab a beer together, it's like that's part of what I think even women looking at men has always been unique about men. Is that we could get in a fist fight, and then 5 minutes later we're like, and we're buddies again, we're cool, right?
And we're talking about the fight. That was a good left.
And women are like, we don't work that way, you know. So is this niceness, is it making us more effeminate? I mean, is it taking us down this path where we are being less manly because we're given in this niceness? We don't have that resilience that we used to have as men, where we could have a fist fight and then turn around and be, we've resolved it. It's over. We're good. Like, let's move on. I think of one of my favorite times at youth camp was we were all sitting around at night in bed, you know, and it's just the guys' cabin, and everyone of the guys had to say what they were thankful for. And I think it was like an 8th grader, and he says, "I'm thankful I'm not a girl, so that I don't have to wake up every day wondering if my best friend wants to kill me." And I thought it was the most hilarious thing I'd ever heard, right? It's like he picked up, he's a really smart kid, but it was funny, like, you know, as a woman, as a young woman especially, like you wake up every day wondering if your best friend wants to kill you. With guys, like, you could literally be in a fight and know that guy loves me, you know? And so is niceness making us more effeminate?
Yes.
I
mean, go ahead.
It's in the culture. It's just where we're at right now. And I think that's exactly right, because the very things you mentioned with the manager and the employer, a lot of those things just require courage, right? They require courage to say, hey, I know this may hurt your feelings, but in a respectful, professional way, I'm going to tell you where you really need to improve. Now, what's really hard about that, it's hard to tell someone you're failing, you know, but to say it clearly and respectfully, that takes courage. And I think Shane, you're bringing up a good point. It's easy. It's easy just to say, hey, you know what? I can just be nice. And then 2 months later, that employee finds out he's fired and he thinks he's doing well. Why? Because no one had the courage to tell him the truth. This fist fighting example, I think of like micro tears, right? When you're lifting, you're doing this micro tears on your muscles, right? And they're repairing themselves. That's how you build muscle. And I think of all things habit-wise are like that. And I feel like where men can sharpen each other up, right, in the field of competition, in the battles of like a friendship, right, through hard things, that's all micro tears for the ability to have that conversation, the ability to have like a real like, you need to tell me more about how you're leading your family, like, because something you said didn't make sense to me, so let me help, let me understand, let's talk about it. That could be a really hard conversation. Without the decade or 20 years of micro tears of pushing your brother around or getting pushed around, or being able to say something hard, hear something hard, feel something hard, just get back up and do it. It's like we're out of habit. We're out of the habit of that. We're not able to just do it anymore. And I see other young guys nowadays, and I'm like, wow, you know,
maybe you've never seen the inside of a locker room. Just so what kind of shenanigans go on
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you know, not that that's necessarily healthy, but to say like these micro tears of building these dynamics so that when you're an adult, you can have a conversation. We got to have good fallow ground to do that still. Because without it, it's what you're kind of saying is this niceness culture where we're avoiding hard conversations that just take a little courage to just get into the conversation, and then you do it together, and you're courageous together, right?
Right.
Yeah, we're missing that.
Yeah.
I think it's starting to atrophy as a guy's skill.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting how so many of these things that I think we're going to be talking about in this podcast, you know, of what does it mean to be a man? We're seeing some things right now, like, well, not being lazy, right? Not lacking courage, you know, being authentic, like some of these things
Being
that
able to
come
take
out.
criticism,
Right.
you know, constructive criticism.
Yeah.
And so you even see in something like, why are we prone to niceness or whatever, it's that's a part of what it means to be a man, is to have some of these things that would protect us from going down that road. So
Yeah, I read a book that I'm not recommending. It's called How Not to. It's called Lying by Sam Harris. And Sam Harris is a prominent atheist. He hates Christians, but I read this book and I'm kind of curious about the guy, right? And he makes this logic sort of moral argument against lying. It's not a terrible book necessarily, but I thought it interesting because I challenged myself to be like, okay, do I lie? Because he's like, no lies, no white lies, no lying at all. I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. But do I do that?
Right.
I'm like, oh boy. I was thinking it's about this authentic question and the niceness thing. You know, most of my lies are around niceness, right? And I think most of us are.
Yeah.
That's a good question to ask yourself. Am I doing any amount of peripheral semi-truth telling just to get out of a harder conversation? Because I think it permeates in things we don't even think about if we really pressed ourselves or pressed each other or whatever. Because that's the altar of niceness.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. So I think this was a fun episode. Any final parting thoughts here? A good wrap up on the application. Anything else? Don't be nice. I'm just kidding. That's not what we're saying.
We're going to make t-shirts.
That's not what we're saying.
That'll be our new theme for Don't Be Nice.
To be fair, I think niceness is a good quality. It's not a replaceable quality for having candor, right? Good conversations.
Right.
So
That's a good way of putting it.
yeah, be nice, but be candid.
That's right.
Thanks, guys. We'll talk soon.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Play the Man podcast. Stay sturdy, friends.